Okay, let's start talking about the next week's assignments that we have here. This is for the week of April 20th. I'm going to go ahead and do 7th hour because I've got the other 4 hours done. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that like I would if I was in any class. If you're not in 7th hour, make sure you click on your course, but it should be very similar. Now, down here, we have Unit 8, which you guys should have started last week. And we have an orange folder called Space Race, Arms Race, and Wars in the Cold War. So what we're looking at is kind of the exterior or the things happening outside of the United States, and there are some things that affect us inside the United States, but this is mostly a foreign policy um, type lesson. So if we go ahead and click on that, you're going to see a series of lessons from 8.5 to 8.9. Now, the first one, 8.5, is about the space race and the nuclear arms race. So, at this time period in American history, there was a huge drive between us and the Soviet Union, or the USSR, to build bigger and better nuclear weapons, and not only build them, but find delivery systems for them. Bombers have limited range, bombers can be shot down, so we started building rockets, and that ultimately led to the space race. Well, today, a lot of times we think of the space race as something that we just did for exploration and discovery. The original purpose of the space race was to put a nuke on a rocket and to hit your enemy. Both nations did so. There was a lot of conflict over this. Not direct conflict, because remember, this is the Cold War, but this is indirect conflict. Now, the Soviets won the first few milestones in the space race. They put the first object into space, Sputnik, a satellite. They put the first living being into space, a little dog. They also put the first human being, a man called, oh, my mind just went blank, but it's here in the video, so you guys could watch it there. I'm sure I'll remember in about 30 seconds or so and then blurt it out. Yuri Gagarin, see? That's how it goes. Okay, so you would watch this video about the space race, and then you watch this video about the nuclear arms race as we increase our capabilities from atomic weapons to hydrogen or nuclear weapons. We build very large bombs, all the way up to 50 megatons, the Tsar Bomba. A megaton, remember, is 1 million tons of explosives. The bombs dropped in World War II, the average size bomb was 500-pound to 1,000-pound bombs, so those are half a ton explosives. Some of the larger ones were 2,000 pounds up to 10,000 pounds, so that would be a 1 to 5 ton bomb. The Hiroshima bomb was about 20,000 tons. So a single one of those Hiroshima bombs was the equivalent of 20,000 1,000-pound bombs. Well, a megaton bomb, which is what these nuclear weapons would do, these hydrogen bombs and nuclear bombs would do, was 1 million megatons at a minimum. These are called city busters. We also built very small ones where we could actually shoot them, as you can see here in the cursor. We could actually shoot them out of an artillery piece. We weren't quite sure what radiation did, so a lot of U.S. Army soldiers went to live tests where they would shoot this nuke 3-4 miles away. The blast wave would roll over U.S. troops who were hiding in trenches, then they would pop up and storm the imaginary target. Pretty soon we figured out that wasn't a good thing, and we banned nuclear testing. But in this lesson, 8.5, you will watch both of these videos, then go ahead and go back into this orange folder and take 8.5 nuclear arms race the test. And I will actually rename these. I just noticed this. I will rename this into 8.5A. So this video will not be correct from what you see, but it should say 8.5A. So you'll go ahead and take this test. It's a lot like the other tests you've taken after watching the video. The next thing we'll look at is 8.6, the Red Scare and Mccarthyism. So as we've learned, communism is associated with the color red. We had a first Red Scare during the 1920s after World War I, when all those European countries were experiencing communist revolutions. We took that out largely against immigrant groups, some of who were actually communists, some who were not, after the war. But then again, after World War II, we faced a very large communist country, the Soviet Union. It was one of the most successful countries at the end of World War II. It became our rival, and Americans feared communism and the spread of it, especially once they noticed it going to China, it went into Korea. Um, there was pushes of communism into Greece, Turkey, and Italy, as well as some communist groups in France. And so America once again experienced a Red Scare. This is by and large the most famous Red Scare. I was going to say popular, but the most famous Red Scare, and it's associated with a man called Senator Joseph McCarthy. So it's called McCarthyism. So what you'll do is once again click on this assignment, and the video's not there, but I will put a video up there for you. And then you will go in here and take the test. And this test is a single question where you will type an answer. And this kind of relates to the final. Some of you may have seen the final folder in there. There's nothing in it published yet, but your final is going to be, once again, another kind of written final. So you'll watch the video, take the test. The next assignment deals with the Korean War, or the conflict in Korea. There are some various sources here. You will go ahead and watch this video. This guy is a little dry, but he's not fast. Some of you have requested no more John Green, and maybe, but right now this is not a John Green video. And in this assignment, what you are going to be doing is deciding, does point of view decide who starts a war? So you're going to be reading two sources. The first source comes from one of the Koreas, either North or South. The other one comes from North or South Korea. They are opposites. You are going to read the two reading passages. So you will read A, you will read B, and then down here in this assignment, you will go ahead and say, according to textbook A, how did the Korean War start? According to textbook B, how did it start? Which one do you find personally more trustworthy? Which one, why do you think so? Please remember, this is going to be practice for your final. Once again, you are going to have to make a decision based off evidence on a specific topic. We'll talk about that topic in a little bit, but and then where else would you go to find? Now, if you guys just write the whole GTS or Google, I'm not going to accept that. I want some specific places. Where can you go to find more information about the Korean War? Then, you need to tell me which textbook each of these came from. So one of these textbooks is from South Korea, one of them is from North, and go ahead and give me the evidence from the text, which one is which. So pretty easy. We've done stuff like this before. Should not take you that long. The next one is the Cuban Missile Crisis. While the Korean War took place in the 1950s, the Cuban Missile Crisis took place in the beginning of the 1960s. Cuba had its own communist revolution, which scared us because Cuba is only about 90 miles away from the United States. This was the closest communism had ever come. There was an attempt at the beginning of the Kennedy administration to invade Cuba and put in a more pro-U.S. government, which failed. This was called the Bay of Pigs. If you guys want to find out more, you can look that up. But you'll watch this video about the Cuban Missile Crisis and take a test. Easy peasy. So I have 3 tests this week for you guys to do. So it's kind of an easier week. Now, this one, the Vietnam War, Home and Abroad. The Vietnam War is a very lengthy subject that we could probably spend the entire semester on, and I'm cutting it down to one day. But what I want you to do is watch 2 videos here. The first one deals with the war itself, all the way back into the 1930s, when various Vietnamese groups were looking for independence from France, who was their colonial master, all the way up to the U.S. withdrawal in 1972 and its conclusion in 1975 when North Vietnam took over South Vietnam and united the country under a single communist rule. So this talks about the things that happened during the war, during the fighting. It does talk about how the war became a quagmire. Now, please be aware the word quagmire is not just the guy in Family Guy and giggity giggity. A quagmire is when you kind of get stuck and you can't get out, and it's messy and it's dirty. Think of quicksand as is portrayed in a movie. That could be a quagmire. Or if you get in a swamp and your feet start getting sucked into that mud and water, that would be a quagmire. And this war was a quagmire. We were there for multiple reasons, which the video will go over. Some were good, some were more politically motivated, some were economically motivated. But there was a lot of confusion in this first war that America really lost. But then we shift over to home. And the reason I'm doing this is next week we're going to look at civil rights and the American home front and the pushback against this counterculture in the 1960s movement and a rise of what's called the rise of conservatism with Nixon and Reagan. But going to go ahead and watch this second film about counterculture. Please be aware this does refer to drugs and sex quite a bit, but that was also part of the culture at the time. I am not advocating any drug use or free love, as they would call it back then, but just be aware this was a major thing as the boomers went from being children to adults. This was their growing up moment, much like you guys as Zoomers are starting to become adults yourselves. So what you're going to do is go ahead and in the comment here, and this is kind of a lengthy assignment, and I want you guys to pay attention to this. In this comment, I want you to write at least 2 paragraphs using your evidence to support your thesis about these issues, right? So what about the Vietnam War caused conflict? So you can talk about military strategy, you can talk about political decisions, you can talk about home events, race relations, which this does talk about a little bit, but we'll go into more next week with our civil rights unit. Find something you want to focus on, come up with a thesis, and write 2 paragraphs using evidence from these 2 videos, or if you want to go outside and find outside evidence, you can, and write about it. That's worth about half of your points. It's worth about 50 points. Then you need to write at least a paragraph to 2 other people's responses. So you need to go ahead and look at what somebody else has posted and respond to it, and at least 2 other people. Now what this response should not be is, I agree with your response, or good point. It needs to be a paragraph, which is at least 5 sentences. So you have to look at their claim, their thesis, look at their evidence and say, I agree with that because I've also found these other pieces of evidence, not the ones they used. Or I'd like to take that further. Hey, have you also thought about this? Or, hey, you're completely off your rocker and you're wrong, and let me explain why. Now, this is good practice for your final because this will be a component of your final, something very similar to this. And then, not only do you have to write your original post, respond to 2 other people, you need to reply to other people's responses to you. So you will make a claim, they will make probably a counterclaim, and then you will have to rebut that counterclaim. Now, I'm not going to hold it against you if nobody has responded to yours, but if no one is responding to yours, what you should do is go into other people's assignments or responses and reply to those. So give it some time. I will go ahead and, if you guys don't finish this by Friday the 24th, that's okay. If you need a little extra time, that's fine. But I would like at least the first part done by Friday the 24th, so I can start grading it. And you would just type it down here. I did set this up so you can see everybody else's responses. Try not to just copy. Try to come up with some original thought, because I know you're all quite bright and quite smart, and you guys can do it. So, guys, thank you for watching this video. If you have questions, feel free to jump on the Zoom meetings, which are now every afternoon from 2 to 3. If you cannot make it to those Zoom meetings and you want more help, we can set up a private Zoom. You can drop me an email. You can go to the Discord. We can set that up. Reach out to your fellow classmates however you can. Text, Snapchat, FaceTime, or through the Discord. Talk to each other. That's a key way to get some advice. So I hope you guys are staying healthy and safe. This will take us through almost the end of April. The week after this, we're going to look at civil rights, race relations in the United States. So Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Cesar Chavez. We're going to look at the rise of conservatism with Nixon and Reagan, and also the end of the Cold War itself in the late 1980s, early 90s. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this will help you all.